there! Welcome to the Aspect Podcast Network, the home of Bending the Narrative. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button below and be the first to listen to our new episodes and other shows from the Aspect, covering topics such as Marvel, Star Wars, Game of Thrones, and more. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bending the Narrative here on the Aspect Network. I'm one of your hosts, Kate Kroonquist, and joining me every week to discuss the latest and the greatest of the world of Avatar is Mr. Alex Batts. Alex Batts, how are you doing?
I am doing great. I am so very hyped to get into this episode. Love this episode a lot. But yeah, so we're going to be continuing our book 2 rewatch with the episode Avatar Day.
Now let's continue tracking Team Avatar and Zuko and Iroh's separate journey with our handy dandy little world map here.
Mm-hmm. So this is fun stuff, making some progress again. But, not they traveled further this time than they
Yeah,
did
we
previously,
got
which is cool.
to a new place.
Yes, and we're also close to Kyoshi Island. We're right across a little bay. Is this a bay? It's like,
What's
I don't
that
know.
image that shows what all the geological formations are called?
No idea.
Okay, never mind. It shows you what an island is, what a plateau is, what
Yeah,
that would
a
help
peninsula.
me in this
This
moment.
is like we are on a peninsula, and then I guess that is like a bay still around there. Anyways, they're real close to Kyoshi Island, which
Anyways,
is which is cool. They
which
made
Alex is very excited about. If you didn't know, which you will know in this episode, Alex loves Kyoshi.
Yeah, this is great. This episode's for me. So they traveled like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 times as much as last.
Yeah.
It's like 2.5 times bigger than the distance from last week and the week prior. So making good progress to, again, not sure what. I don't really know where they're going
Yeah,
here.
wait, yeah,
Actually,
we never
the more that I think about it
yeah.
and like look at the map, I'm like, you're just going to like the edge of land right now.
Are we just going through the Earth Kingdom? I think they're just going through the Earth Kingdom right now.
I guess, yeah,
Having
that
side
would make sense
missions.
because like it's just further down from them right now, right?
Yeah. And
I
they're
believe so.
looking for an earthbending teacher.
So like we're just gonna scour the whole kingdom. I mean, good for them for the determination, I suppose. I have to assume that's what's
Yeah.
happening here. Um,
Hey, it's about the journey, not the destination.
you're so right. So yeah, they traveled a little bit there at Chin Village for this next to Kyoshi Island,
Mhm.
and
Have we
yeah,
played Zuko and Iroh?
they're just like
They're
around there is
around somewhere.
what we assume. Yeah, like they're just in there, and we finally have a location for them. And
Mhm.
so they're just like kind of on their own, also camping, having a great time in the forest.
Yeah. They're still in the woods. They're still begging for money on the streets. They're still not doing too hot.
Yeah, just not having the best day.
No.
They're camping in a little like alcove thing, is what it looks
Mhm.
like. It's like a cave overhang. It's not like a super
Yeah.
deep cave, I don't think, but they got a little bit of shelter and are just getting food and stuff. So yeah, that's where we pick up. For Book 2, Episode 5, Avatar Day is directed by Lauren McMullen and written by John O'Brien. And if you're just joining us, we will be discussing the show in its totality. So, of course, be warned about spoilers. And now to jump into the recap as quickly as I can do it. So we have the gang waking up and they're immediately found by I know that you have a lot more facts about these guys, which we'll get into later, but they're what, the rhino
The rough rhinos.
the rough rhinos, right? And these, I guess, are like mercenaries is what I'm getting the vibe
Mhm.
from, because they're not like Fire Nation soldiers, but they are Fire
They're
Nation.
kind of like the male version of Azula's little girl squad, I would say. They're just an elite squad, elite fighting
Okay,
squad.
an elite
Mhm.
fighting squad. Loved it. Well, they're not that elite because they let these guys get away, but they have
Mhm.
them. They have them surrounded
They
in
can't
their
do shit.
sleep and fumble. But so the gang gets away. They Aang and Katara have to go back for his staff and then her scrolls, but they leave Sokka's boomerang, which is funny, and we'll come back later. But they get away and they go to this village, and this village is celebrating Avatar Day, which Aang is like, "Ah, sick! This is awesome!" And we see some floats of both Kiyoshi and Avatar Roku, which is fun. And then we get Aang as well. He's got a big giant float. And then they start lighting them on fire and
Uh-huh.
chanting like "Death to the Avatar" and "Down with the Avatar." And the whole celebration is about talking about how much they hate the Avatar because of the crimes that Avatar Kiyoshi committed against them. And
Which way to hold a
so
grudge.
yeah,
Damn.
honestly, like, all right, man, I guess.
Mhm.
So they are saying that Aang needs to face the crimes that Kiyoshi committed, and he's like, all right, I'll go in jail. Like, I can't, I'm not gonna fight them for this. I'll deal with it. And he's like, we'll have a trial or whatever. And so Sokka and Katara end up leaving to go to Kyoshi Island to find some evidence to support Aang, because they're like, if we can investigate this story about Kyoshi murdering the Chen, who the village is named after, like what was it, 370 years ago
370
or
years ago,
so?
yeah.
Yeah, like to the day.
Somewhere around that.
Um, so yeah, long grudge. But they're saying
No
that
grudge.
if Sokka and Katara can find some evidence to contradict the story, that will help Aang and they can free him. So they go back to Kyoshi Island. Aang is left in their little jail prison. I love the visual gag of him just like moving his hands out of the like thing.
Yes.
There's like, it's just such a funny moment. He's just sitting there like bonding with all of the inmates and they're like talking about stuff. It's such a
It's like the
chill
Superman thing where
thing.
he just moves his arms and he's
Just like takes the cuffs off. It's so
yeah.
great. And it's just the idea that like he's there, it's reinforcing the whole like he's just there because
Mhm.
he's choosing to be there, like he's
Yeah.
letting them keep him there,
Mhm.
which is great character stuff and just also a hilarious visual gag.
Yeah.
So he's doing that in prison while Katara and Sokka gather evidence. They like put the case together and get some great Kyoshi lore, which we'll break down later.
Uh-huh.
um,
We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
so like they do that, they come back and they're presenting the case and they're like, "Oh yeah, we have all this stuff." And the guy's like, "Oh, that's not like how we like do things. Like I'll say what happened and then Aang will say what happened and then we'll decide who's right." He's like, "That's why we call
Like
it justice, because it's just us," which is such a funny joke. Um,
it's so cute.
and so Aang has to present his own case, bumbles through it, and then they're like, okay, well, maybe if we get him dressed up as Kyoshi, like she'll come back and like say something. And they get him all dressed up as Kyoshi, and she does end up like
Mhm.
appearing and basically just confesses to the entire crime. She's like, yeah, I did that shit.
She's like, yeah,
That
I
dude,
killed that guy. He sucked.
he's like, that dude
Love
was
her.
awful. He was a conqueror. He was trying to overthrow the Earth King, all of this stuff. And so she separates the island from the plateau, and that's what becomes Kyoshi Island. And then she like,
Also sick
leaves.
as hell.
Oh, dude, it's unbelievable, an incredible moment. I literally, in all caps, it was like Kyoshi splits the island and moves the tectonic plate, like
She moves it
literally
up.
creates an island. Are you kidding me? It's the coolest. And then also, this dude falls to his death, like he just falls off the cliff thing, and like
Mhm.
it's. I feel like you can read it as either her using earthbending to move the thing down and he falls, or like him
Ooh.
just getting mad and being stupid also, and just like the thing breaking away because
Yeah.
of the land splitting and like falling. But she does say explicitly the first thing she does is like, "Yeah, I killed him." So like
She's like, yeah.
she's
And whether
definitely
he
taking
fell or not, she's like, I don't see the difference.
yeah.
Bars.
The intent was there for sure. And so then comes back and she when Aang gets back, he's like, "Oh, what happened?" And she's like, "Well, you kind of confessed to it." So he's found guilty. They spin this wheel of punishment that has a bunch of different stuff,
Love the
and
wheel
it
of
lands.
punishment.
It's so funny, and it lands on being boiled in oil. And then the rough rhinos show up and start
Good
attacking them,
time.
and they're like, "Avatar, help us." And he's like, "Oh, I was found guilty, I would love to." And then the dude changes it to community service. And then Aang and Team Avatar fight off the rough rhinos and are able to save the village. And Avatar Day, the celebration, gets a new purpose, and it's celebrating Aang saving all of them from the rough rhinos and that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, intercut with all of this throughout the episode was Zuko and Iroh, and Zuko just going full Robin Hood, stealing. No, well, not Robin Hood. He's just straight up
He's
stealing
giving it to
from
himself. Yeah, he's just
yeah.
stealing.
He's just stealing from everyone and bringing the supplies back to Iroh, and Iroh's, being who he is and being like, this is not good, obviously, and trying to like talk Zuko out of being just like super down on everything and wallowing in despair and saying that he needs hope and all this stuff. It's honestly a great pep talk from Iroh. It's so good. And
You
Zuko
see, like,
kind of
yeah.
like shrugging it off a little bit and not really like letting it sit in. But then by the end of the episode, Zuko's like, "Oh, I did learn something, and like you're right. Like I need to move out on my own and like forge my own path, essentially." And so they part ways by the end of the episode. And yeah,
I
that's like
hate Zuko in this episode.
he's just not.
How
He's a
dare
little.
you be mean to Iroh?
Yeah, he's not. He's not the best. He's not in a good headspace right now. And I was just trying to help, and he's like, "Nah, it's fine." And he's also just stealing from literally everyone, which is not the best. But that's where we leave our characters for this episode and the recap. But what do you think about this episode overall? Careful where you
It's
tread.
I know, it's not there's just I think
It's
we
not.
swapped from last episode. It's not my favorite,
Mhm,
um, but also that doesn't mean it's a bad episode. It's still a good episode. I think a lot of good things happen. Um, I like that we learn a lot of world building lore, and we do get a lot of character building or just characters being themselves and doing their thing. We get Sokka getting to be Sherlock Holmes.
mhm.
He's
Oh,
always
that's
kind
such
of
a
been
funny bit.
yeah, which I love that bit. He has their version of a pipe and the top hat, the funky hat,
Mhm.
which I love. It's like the little dragon bubbler.
Yeah,
Um,
Katara's even like, "Where did you get that?" Like,
yeah, he's like has the monocle. It's so good. I like that he gets to shine in his little moment. He gets to be silly Sokka.
mhm,
I was saying this a week ago, but we get some really cool animation and new types of animation in this episode. We see some like rotoscoping. We see some cool like fisheye lens. Um,
mhm.
and like, there's a little bit of my favorite part in here, and that's the frothing at the mouth guy,
Oh, yes.
which
I love
can't
that
forget
one,
him.
I love that they bring that bit back, but then
It's so good.
also, like, whenever Aang isn't there, we see him, like, recover and get like, whenever he
Yes.
finds out that Aang's not there, he
Ah.
just, like, gets up and, like, walks away, like,
The way he moves, he's like, and then he like rubs the
whatever.
spit off of his mouth, and he's like, let me collect myself.
Yeah. No, it's incredible.
It's so good. And then I love this like little fisheye lens that kind of happens when Sokka is explaining, like, can't you just go all like airbending slice? And he moves kind of funky, which airbending slice is a real move. I think that's kind of funny.
Mm. Yeah.
But yeah, we get some good, cute little character moments and the lore.
Yeah. I also so
There's
most
a
of
lot
I
about it.
do have a like couple of like kind of big questions that I noticed that this episode asks, and then honestly, I do kind of agree with you in the fact that this is not my favorite. Like literally, the Kiyoshi stuff catapults this episode for me, just
Yeah.
because I'm a big Kiyoshi fanboy, and so like all of that stuff. But like most of that, I think I'll save for talking about in the next segment because that's more general lore and world building stuff that sets up more things for the future and just kind of like expands the Avatar narrative. But in this episode, one thing I did notice that I think is super interesting, and I wrote it down in my notes, but like they mentioned at the beginning, like water tribe money. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't remember if that's been brought up or not before, but the fact that each nation has their own currency, I think is super interesting. And I literally, in my notes, I was like, well, how are the conversion rates for this?
What are the
And
conversion? Do
then,
they have like an EU, like a kind of version
yeah,
of
like, is that what this is?
they
And then
have the
also,
Avatar Union? I don't know.
there does, though, seem to be a like standard currency, as we saw last week with Iroh and
Oh,
Zuko, and like getting like a gold piece or like a whatever, the
I wonder if
first
that's
coin they.
just Earthbender money or
Yeah, but I don't know. So like
um,
it's an interesting thing. I just think in general the fact that they like drop in that there are different currencies for each of the nations, like that. I mean, I guess that does like make sense that they all have their own economies and like that kind of thing. Um, but and then also the fact that they like then don't accept the water tribe money is really funny whenever he's like because for posting for bail. I was trying to think of the context of when that gets brought up again. They're
yeah,
like, you're gonna have to pay bail, and he's like, okay, sure, and then they don't accept water tribe money, which is a hilarious joke, um, which is funny. And so yeah, I think that the currency thing is just
very
like it's another
interesting.
yeah thing that they like make more complex, and then also in doing so make it more believable as like a world, and it's just a super like
Yeah,
small and subtle thing. The other thing that I think is really interesting that gets brought up in this episode is the like super harsh, like the down with the avatar like chant, and like what it
Ooh.
means to be like a leader slash like deity or being with immense power, like something like the avatar. Like, are you inevitably going to have both like cult like followings and fanboys like we see with the people on Kyoshi Island, and then also like people who were like that far on the opposite end where they're like having an entire day that's about
Mhm.
celebrating like burning floats of you? Like, is that
Yeah.
something that has to happen and is just like a byproduct of being a like person with this much power and in this kind of position?
Mm. And
I
like
think is interesting.
fame.
Yeah, like that they like, it feels like that's just kind of hand in hand with it, like it's going to happen. um you have, you know, your supporters and your like decriers on one side and the other. But
It's a hot
then
topic too right now in the real world. I feel like there's if you're
yeah.
following an artist named Chapel Roan, she touches on that a lot. That's right
Hmm.
now. She
Yeah,
talks
it
a lot
feels like
about the horrors of fame.
it's just something that like it's another level of tribalism that starts up, and then it's just also so interesting how much, like how large that group on either side, I guess, or the intensity of whatever group can get, and it's like targeted like a singular person is such a like wild thing, honestly. um but so I think that it like kind of addresses that, or like leans into
Mhm.
that, is super interesting. But then also, I think that the ethical and moral questions about how does the avatar specifically reckon with the ethical decisions across like dozens of lifetimes? Like,
Mm.
can there be like, should Aang be held morally responsible for the actions that Kyoshi committed? Like, is there a level of moral culpability there? Like,
Yeah.
is there a separation between like what one avatar is and isn't responsible for? Because the series also does play kind of loose with it, like at times it does emphasize that they are one person, but then
Mhm.
also like individuals beyond that as well. And so it's like, how are we supposed to hold them morally accountable
Mhm.
across of it? Like, are we supposed to like, do we just have to judge them based on like one lifetime and like draw a hard cutoff there? That feels kind of intuitively like the more reasonable thing to do, because even if like it is technically one being, it really feels like they're not across that, like across different lifetimes. But I don't know, like I can definitely see the argument that you're like, well, no, but it's still like the avatar. And so
Yeah.
like I get that side and can see where they're coming from there. Um, but then also, even aside from the like holding people morally responsible for their actions in like the larger culture, like how do you, as the avatar, emotionally like reconcile that? Like, how does someone
Like,
who's
how do
like
you
Aang,
fix the mistakes of your past?
yeah, like how do
Not
you one fix it, and then also like just like being a pacifist, how do you deal with the fact that you in your past life were like, yeah, I murdered this dude and like would do it again for sure? Like,
Yeah.
that's a lot to
Would
like deal
do it
with.
again.
Yeah, like that's basically what she's saying. She's like, oh yeah, 100%, like that was me,
Like, I
I
made
did
the
it.
right choice.
Yeah, like she's very explicit about that, and so I think that that's just a really fascinating angle to like, I don't know, have to deal with. Like, I don't. That'd be wild to think about the fact that you're like, oh, that was
Mhm.
me, but it wasn't me, which is an entire like that's a whole emotional baggage thing that the avatar has to deal
Yeah.
with in general. Just like
And I like that that
being
is kind
like,
of like a minor thing that he deals with that's not like explicitly focused on. I'd say something kind of going on in the background at all times. And I think that
mhm,
mirrors too, like Zuko ends up kind of having that where he's like, how do I fix the mistakes of my past, of my bloodline, of my
right,
father?
hmm,
And the
it's a form of like,
ooh.
one, how do I like make reparations for that?
Hmm.
To like, what level do I need to like, how do you make it, like how do you balance it, kind of like, and then also, yeah, just having to do the same thing, but like having to do it both internally and externally, like having to like
Hmm.
reconcile it with yourself, and then also realize what you can do externally to like make it better or be better going forward, or like whatever the case may be. um it's a lot to deal with, and I really like that this
Very
does
interesting.
get.
I'd never even thought about it that way.
Yeah, I think it this again, because like I'm really I think that moral responsibility is super interesting, because again, bringing it back to like, this was what, last week, I think. um like, I if everything's determined, then no one has moral responsibility because they
Oh,
couldn't
yep.
have acted any other way technically. And so like moral responsibility in general, I think, is super fascinating because of that for me. But then it's still like, even if we like ignoring that part of it, like talking about punishments and redemption and that kind of thing, like what are the ways to like hold people, like what does accountability look like if you do ascribe moral responsibility to people, like even if you are looking strictly like at Kiyoshi, like even taking Aang away from it, like Kiyoshi killed this dude, how, and she's responsible for that, like how do you then hold her morally accountable? Like is
Yeah.
putting her in prison the right thing to do? And it's like, well, in my
Boiled
opinion,
in
I think
oil.
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Like, is boiled in oil the right thing? Like, community service. Like, is that the way to then? And like, that's what they land on here. They're like, oh, well, he does something beneficial rather than something like negative happening to him, which I think is the better way to like approach moral accountability, because then, because like I don't think punitive anything like that's just a net negative outcome.
Yeah.
Like at that point, like something bad happened and your response is like, let's make more bad stuff happen, like that's not good for anyone really.
Yeah, I don't,
um
an eye for
it
an
just
eye
doesn't,
type of thing.
yeah, like it just doesn't make sense. And so I think that's a big thing and a super
I
interesting
mean,
thing,
and
and the
that
fact,
is too the big decision at the end of the whole series that Aang has to come to. Do
right,
I
like
do
is it
this thing
justified?
that is it justified? Do I even
Hmm.
want to do this?
Yeah, so like that's
Spoiler
a
alert, he comes up with that great solution.
right, and that's what, and that's again though, that's like what makes him, like that furthers the argument that you would hold the different avatars like morally responsible for each of their
Mhm.
actions, because like that's not Kyoshi, what how Kyoshi would have handled it. Like
Yeah.
she straight up was like, no, I saw what needed to be done and like I did it. Like this dude was a conqueror, he was going to like, he was,
Mhm.
which also I found this out whenever I was doing a little bit of light research on like more context after this episode. He was trying to overthrow the 46th Earth King, like completely, like just take over the
Oh,
entire Earth Kingdom. Yeah, like like she's like Chen the Conqueror, and like he was going to expand like his empire, and like yeah,
oh,
he
that
was
was
just straight up,
her Ozai.
yeah, like she was stopping him. um and so one, I like the idea that it does present, it doesn't like ask this and give an explicit answer either way, but it does present the question if you want to ask it of like, was Kiyoshi right to do this? I would say
Mhm.
yes, but I know I
Oh,
said that after I just was like punitive punishment is not the way to go, but then that brings into like question, at what point do you have to take certain actions to like stop something, right? And so that's a whole other
mhm.
thing, like how, like what is the right way to go about that type of conflict and that level of conflict. And I think it's cool that this like then gets into showing differences in how Kyoshi handled things and setting up the fact that Aang will not necessarily do things the same way, um, which I think is really cool. And could that they do that. um, they also, I like the idea that it like, again, it's like one line, but talking about different court systems and different ideas of justice, like
Mm.
what does
Yes.
justice mean? Like we were kind of just talking about that, but like
Hmm.
their court system, like we're obviously used to the process in our country and like how that
Hmm.
goes, and like Aang and Katara, and then like presume it would be how we recognize of it, but in this village, in this community, they're like, oh no, that's not how we do justice here. And the idea that like justice is this, um bendable is not the word I'm looking for, but like it's
Hmm.
this it's not like a one
Moldable.
thing. Yeah, like it, yeah, exactly, you can like
Yeah.
mold it, and like people have different definitions of what justice is. Like how we were just saying that I don't think punitive justice or punishment is like the right way to go about justice. Like there are people that disagree, like they do think that
Hmm.
punitive justice is the way to go, and it's so it's like one different like just processes for like court type stuff and like legal proceedings and like that kind of thing, or even
And
the
I like that
idea
that's in
of
this
a court.
world.
Yeah, like they do show like,
That
oh well, not
lore.
everyone does things the same way. It's again like the currency thing, just making it a more believable world, even if we have an avatar who's this being who has like hundreds of reincarnations and like can bend elements, right? It's still this like, oh well, but they also have like different court systems that people
Hmm.
use and like that's interesting, and they do have different ideas of justice and like what it means morally, and that's super cool. Like I like that
And we
they
get that from
include that.
one episode.
Yeah, like
One
there's,
little,
yeah,
that's a silly episode.
yeah,
Silly in quotes.
it's a silly little episode, and we get ideas about like moral responsibility and
And
like
like,
what's ethically right to
the,
do in
yeah,
court
like
systems.
ethical court systems.
Yeah, and like it displays it all, and it does give I think that it gives, because it's not too explicit and like, oh, this is the right thing to do and this is what should be done, but like you just see what intuitively feels like the better way to go about things consistently in the show. Also, like I like that it presents these questions. It's not super overt about like, hey, this is the right thing. I mean, sometimes it is, but like for the most part, it's just like you get to the right thing by kind of experiencing it with the characters rather than being like, this is the right thing and this is why we did the right thing or whatever, you know. And so I think
Yeah,
that's
it's
cool.
open-ended. It's not black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. All right,
It's
well, when
fantastic.
we come back, we are going to talk more about this. We're going to dive more into this episode about how it contributes to the overall narrative of the series. So we will be right back real quick.
Hey, Aspect listener, I'm Robbie.
And I'm Alex, enjoying the show here on the Aspect Network.
Then check out Framing the Force.
We are your one-stop shop for all things in a galaxy far, far away. Each week, we discuss everything from the latest news and releases to the hottest topics in the fandom.
Beyond the films and series, we share our thoughts on every corner of the Star Wars universe, from comics to video games to collectibles and everything in between.
Join us every week as we discuss one of the greatest franchises in film history here on the Aspect Network.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Bending the Narrative. Before the break, we broke down the episode Avatar Day, and now we're discussing how this episode contributes to the overall series and story in the world of Avatar. Kate, let's start with you. How does this episode contribute to the overall narrative in the world of Avatar?
Well, we do get some good little, like I said before, lore building. We're getting a lot of good world building here.
Yes.
We get the Rev Rhinos, which I want to talk about a little bit later. We get some good. What I love most about this episode is it's so short and small, but we get such a good Zuko Iroh moment, which I love my little Zuko Iroh moments. Iroh has such a beautiful line, such a line full of so much wisdom to Zuko. He talks about, I have to say the line verbatim.
I'm glad that you wrote it down.
I wrote it down because it's so good. He says, "You must never give in to despair. Allow yourself to slip down that road, and you surrender to your lowest instincts. In the darkest times, hope is something you give yourself. That is the meaning of inner strength."
Oh, bars.
I'm going to go cry.
Love it. It's a fantastic line, honestly. And I'm glad it's honestly so good that you're on the show too, to like highlight this moment, because just straight up it's a fantastic Zuko and Iroh stuff, but like for me, it just gets completely overshadowed by the rest of the
Yes, by
like,
the whole rest. I know you love your Kyoshi stuff.
I can't think about anything else. Like, oh, but her boots and the fans and like
but Iroh bars.
No, it's really it's
like
fantastic.
A list of Iroh bars.
That's a good idea. We should
like,
do that. Would have been cool to think about at the start of this.
At the start of this episode, but I think things on the fly.
No,
but anyways, Iroh spits bars, just his wisdom shining through and his passion for Zuko. And he says this line too, like the way he says these lines, he's like, "No, Zuko," like he's angry. Like he's like, "Don't do this." Like he's getting frustrated with him after he's seeing him stealing. He's getting suspicious. He doesn't want to be upfront like, "When the hell are you stealing?" But he's like, this is a bad slippery slope to fall under. You like, he's his leader. He's talking about a moral compass and just so good. And
it's him like recognizing that he's forming these bad habits and that's just going to perpetuate him being in this, just these bad habits in this negative cycle and like nothing good coming from that. And like also emphasizing that like, well, whatever outlook you have is going to inform and color what you then experience. Like if you go into every day being like, oh, this is going to be the worst day ever, like you're probably gonna have a pretty bad day. Like it's not, you're not giving it a chance to be a good day. Right. And so it's him like understanding that and seeing that and not wanting to have to watch Zuko wallow in that and just be that. Unfortunately for Zuko and us as viewers, we get to see that for a little bit longer.
He's so mean to him. It breaks my heart when he's like, "I learned I need to travel alone because you don't agree with me." And I was like, but Iroh's still good. And he still is like, wait, and gives him the ostrich horse. So he's sweet. Like, don't travel on your feet. Like he wants the best for him. And I like too that this is one of those little examples where it's, you can help somebody, but it's not going to be, they're not going to agree with you at first. It's going to take time to break down that wall that they have and to break down that, I guess, whatever they've built up. It's going to take a while to break that down and to heal them. Healing is
Yeah,
not linear. It's not going to just be like you say one good thing to them and they're like, oh my God, you're right, enlightened.
yeah, like it's a
This is season
process. It's
2.
not an instant like flip that happens. It takes time.
Yeah.
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You know what I'm saying?
You can lead an ostrich horse to water.
But yeah, it's a thing. Like it's not just going to be an instant thing for Zuko, and he's very resistant to it at first. He doesn't.
Yes.
Yeah, he has to want to help himself also in order to get any help from Iroh. And he's not there yet. He's got to go through some more emo times before he can get there,
Our
and have that
best
time.
emo boy.
Yeah, that stuff is really good, but for me,
But
we get
Kyoshi.
so much Kyoshi lore in this episode. It's so good.
Let's
It's
dive into her
incredible.
Kyoshi lore. What we have learned so much about her. First, she has big feet.
She's
Love
huge.
a big woman.
I
love big
love
women.
the shot whenever it's like her at first and then it zooms out and you see her in comparison to Chin and like
Yes.
she's just giant. They do make emphasis to like note that she's just like the biggest person ever, basically. Like she's huge. Like she's literally the biggest person. She's like 7 feet tall, like a little over
so
7 feet
sick.
tall. It's
Reminds
awesome.
me of Gwendolyn of Tar. What's her name? Gwendolyn of Tar
Yeah.
from Game of
Yeah.
Thrones.
Yes.
Or is that, am I thinking of the actress? What is her
No,
name?
that is her. Brienne of Tarth.
Brienne of Tarth, but her
Who
name
is
is
Gwendolyn?
Gwendolyn. That's her name.
Oh, that's the actress's name? Okay.
Right.
Yeah, Brienne of Tarth.
Gwendolyn Christie, that's her name.
That makes sense. Yeah, she's just ginormous.
My
which is
favorite
awesome.
trope.
She's
Big,
so
strong
great.
women.
Love her. And so yeah, we see like when we get more on her, we see her like outfit more, which we've seen because of our previous trip to Kyoshi Island. And I can't not believe I'm blanking on her name. I literally
Suki?
Yes, Suki. I knew it was an S.
Wow.
I for some reason was saying like Sophie in my head, and I was like, that's not it. That's not. Nope. But like we've seen the outfit because of Suki and the Kyoshi Warriors. But we like get more on that. We see her actual outfit and stuff, which is super cool. We also so like it's not stated in this episode. I can't remember if they bring it up specifically in the Kyoshi Island episode either, but her age. But like it is kind of hinted at her age in this by the fact that the one dude is like, oh yeah, this happened 370 years ago is whenever she murdered Chen the Conqueror, right? So that's 370 years, and we know that Aang was asleep for 100. Roku was 70 years old when he died in 12. Oh, which also I'm about to drop a cool little tidbit that I don't know if I discovered this earlier. So I was looking it up, and I was looking to see to double check how old Kyoshi was. She was 230 when she died. So she died in 82 BG. Do you know what the BG stands for?
Before.
It's so dark. Honestly, it stands for before genocide. So all parents, yeah, it's insane.
What?
So apparently I absolutely blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, this is horrifying and also makes so much sense. So yeah, the way they track time.
I would like a word with you.
For Avatar is before and after the genocide of the air nomads. So yeah, Roku died in 82 BG. He was 70. Or no, he died in 12 BG. He was 70. Kyoshi died in 82 BG. And so she was 230. So like, again, these specific numbers aren't like, you can't get all of this information just from this episode. It's putting like other things together. But it is kind of like, that there's just
the narrative lore right there.
Oh, it's
narrative official fun statement.
My jaw dropped whenever I saw that. I was like, because I saw the BG and like it was like saying it's the year that she died, and I was like, what does BG stand for? Like what? And I like went to quick Google and I was like, oh my God, this is horrifying.
That's like, what if we labeled our years before Holocaust, after Holocaust?
Right?
Like,
yeah, no, straight up. But I mean, it makes sense. Like that's a huge pivot. And like, so the start of the 100-Year War is 0 AG, is like what it's technically classified as. Which is super interesting. So we're in like 12 AG right now because Aang is 12.
No, 112, right?
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah,
I can do math. I was adding those 100 years. But yeah, so like
fake fan over here, guys. We got him.
Just crazy. But also them saying that it's 370 years ago does give you some inference as to the fact that she was like way older, because we know there's only the 100 years and then Roku's lifetime like before we have Kyoshi. So like I just always love being able to drop the fact that Kyoshi lived to 230 years old,
Yeah, that's
which
insane.
is
Because isn't the oldest
unreal.
person we know at this point?
She's the only Avatar who's had an extended life.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
they all
Boo's
end up
pretty
being,
old.
yeah, and like
Um,
they all end up being old. Like Roku still was 70. Aang dies pretty young comparatively to the rest of the avatars. Well,
oh
Kuma
yeah.
also is like pretty young when he dies, but still, like Kyoshi's the only person to get to just a straight
She's
up
just a
like
beast.
a ridiculous age. So that's cool. I love getting that lore there. Again,
That
her
is very
whole
cool.
outfit, yeah, it's crazy, and the BG and AG stuff is wild. Like that's just gnarly.
I love it. And we
Um,
get good callbacks too. We get the origin of Kyoshi Island. We get why
mhm,
it's called Kyoshi Island. We
yes.
also get a callback to Suki. Sokka didn't, you thought he forgot Yue. He didn't. You thought he forgot Suki. He didn't. Reminder,
Hmm.
these other characters are here and they still matter. They're still in the
Yes.
world. We get an update about Suki. She's fighting in the war. And
Hmm.
Sokka's like, oh man.
Right. He's a little bit bummed.
It's like,
Understandable.
damn, what a ladies' man in these past two episodes.
Right.
We
We
get
see what
reminders
he's
like
focused on.
people's.
Yeah, no, it is cool that you do get that update. You're like, oh, why are these people not here? And like, it's also an explanation to like one, not have them there, because then that's a lot more to deal with in the story, and they don't have like that's
Uh-huh.
not why they're there, right? But then it also is a thing that makes sense for the characters and is like growth for them without them even needing to be there. You're like, oh well, they like are fighting in the war, they're taking a stance, they're doing the right thing, which is awesome. And yeah, like getting the more background beyond Kyoshi Island, the fact that she created Kyoshi Island is insane. We get to see
I
her
think that's,
split the plateau. Are
and
you
she
kidding me? I
uses
know we
the
talked about this.
lava
Yeah.
underneath the island to move it. You were like the tectonic plates.
I'm like, come on, dude, get
That's
out of
sick.
here. It's too
Get
cool.
out of here. Using
It's
the
awesome.
fans.
Yes. Oh, she's so, I love her using the fans, and she's so proficient with them. They're such cool weapons, and the way that she uses them with all of the bending, and like she's just such a literal force of nature, and it makes me so
Yes.
happy. And she's so cool. And I love that we get to see that. And like her
Literally
appearance is just so
going.
awesome. Like how badass do you have to be to come in and just be like the first, yeah, I killed him. Awesome. And she's like, I did everything I
Yeah,
did,
I
and I
killed him.
feel incredibly justified in
And
it.
what
And oh
about
yeah,
it?
and by the way, I created an island to keep my people safe and like make sure things were peaceful, and like did what I had to
Bad
do.
bitch behavior.
It really
Mhm.
like this episode does so much. It's hard for me too to like at this point think about this episode devoid of the other context that we now have surrounding Kiyoshi. Like we have two books about her now,
Mhm.
right? And so like there's a lot more there. But it's impressive how much this automatically establishes her
Just a
character's
little.
like nature, and the fact that
Mhm.
she very much is the avatar who she's like she's the stereotype that's like there are hard decisions that need to be made. I will make those hard decisions, and like I'll be that person, and like she's
Yeah.
like that's my responsibility and my burden as the avatar, and like 100% how she is like through the books. It's cool in the books because then you get to see like what makes her into that. But
Ooh.
like that core is just there like in this episode. It's using that to then inform what we get later, which is great.
Because
She's
yeah,
such
this
a
will
strong
all be
character.
important all to the end of the episode. Or not
Yes.
the episode, the whole series.
Yeah. And like it's again just showing, and we talked about it a little bit in the last segment, but just the stark differences between her personality and Aang, and how
Mm.
that kind of like differs. Um Again, yeah, this episode was really good about, as you just mentioned, like with talking about Suki and the Kyoshi warriors, like again connecting to past events. Like we're back at Kyoshi Island. Like this thing mattered. These people are still having
Mhm.
lives, and like
Wasn't just a
everything that we
one-off.
saw, yeah, like everything we saw was meaningful. There's weight to it. Like this is a world that is moving along with the characters also, which is really like that's an important thing to establish and kind of hammer home, and they do a great job with that. Um yeah, I mean it's great. Also the story is sick. Like the little, I love that the show does that a lot.
Like we kind of get a
But
little murder mystery.
yeah, and like like one the episode story, yeah, the like murder mystery thing, like how did it happen is just cool, and like them
It's
putting the
just
clues together.
cool.
Sure, like yeah, like you said earlier, Sokka is like the Sherlock stereotype is fun and like
Yeah, we get like a
playful,
little detective work and
but then also, and a consistent thing this show does is like the short little story within the episode that they do. That's always like the past lore things, like the Kiyoshi part of it, like her story, is also just a really interesting thing. Like in like 5 sentences, we get a quick like a full picture of these events that happen and like how it went down, and like you feel the impact of it, and you can see the significance because of how things are playing out in the present day. And it's again one of those things of like I forget the episode name. Oh, The Great Divide. Whenever it's talking about like how this idea or like how these series of events have possibly been warped, and then how that evolved into the like, oh well, this is Avatar Day to celebrate like how much we hate the Avatar because of this thing, even though that thing was like a good thing that happened. You know, it's
Yeah.
like stop being a conqueror, right?
And they call him Chin the Great. And
Yeah,
he was called Chin the Conqueror. He is a
right.
horrible dude.
Which also, it's so funny. This dude's name is Chin. I thought it was. I literally like hearing it. I went to Google and I was like, oh, but also Chin the Conqueror like does have a great like ring to it. I can't lie. Like,
and like, do you think? I wonder how long this village has been a thing. Like, they almost seem fairly new. Like it's made up, almost like this mayor guy who also James Hong, love him.
right. Yeah.
Iconic voice. Everybody recognizes his voice. He's one of the most prolific, dedicated actors of our time. He has done. I think he's one of the people who has some of the most credits of all actors. I think he's one of those.
That's wild. I can't imagine that, honestly.
He has some of the most credits, like, of all actors. But love him. Everybody knows his voice. I just love that little pull right there. And then also the frothing mouth guy is voiced by Brian Konietzko.
Oh, that's hilarious, actually.
Which I don't know if I mentioned that when we first did it or if that was there, but...
Well, does he even say anything in the first one? I mean, I guess he does because he just screams like about the Avatar.
He literally just screams, yeah.
That's funny.
He makes
that's cool.
Noises.
We love stuff like that.
Sidetrack.
No, that's good. But yeah, I think that it's able to do so much with the like overall world and the lore in such a like condensed amount of time. We always talk about how much they're able to pack into these episodes, and it's just always the case. Like they just do it the entire show, and it's
one great little creative ways, which is rare to find, I think, in most media anywhere.
Even it's wild, honestly, that it feels like it's super creative every time too. Because if you really think about it, and I'm really noticing it now, doing the show, that like even though they're following roughly a very similar pattern each time, because like I would say the first like half of the episode, a lot of the time is generally like the setup or whatever thing, and in the back half you get the thing that does add a lot to the lore or whatever the thing might be, and like that sort of payoff. And like that's kind of what happens each time, but it always manages to feel different, or it's expanding on a segment of the world that's much more removed than what we were talking about last week, or whatever the case may be. And so it's like touching on all of these different elements that then make the huge world that we have. And I think it's also part of the reason that like the show has had such a lasting impact and like staying power. Like the reason we're doing a podcast almost like 20 years after the show first aired, like still diving into the episodes and stuff, it's because there's just so much there, and the fact they managed to pack it into 22-minute episodes is ridiculous, honestly.
And that needs to be talked about more.
It's great. I don't get how they did it, but I'm very thankful.
Very thankful.
Yeah. So I think, did you have any more points about, you know, the overall world and what this episode brings to it?
Not about the overall world, but
you do have some facts. So when we return, Kate is going to share with us some fun facts about this episode. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to Bending the Narrative. Before the break, we dove into the narrative of Book 2, Episode 5, Avatar Day. And now we wanted to take a few minutes to shine some light on some of the fun facts and tidbits from this episode. Kate, take it away.
Well, I just think it's funny. We were talking about how everything in the show, like nothing goes without waste. Nothing is wasted. Everything has details in it. I figured out through some research, the rough rhinos have a whole backstory and lore.
They got lore.
They got lore. The character that you see for 2 seconds every couple episodes, yeah, they have a whole backstory. Avatar does not miss. So, incredible. First of all, they're all named. So we have the commander is Colonel Monkey. He was a firebender. He's one of the only firebenders in the group. And he had actually once served under Iroh in the Fire Nation military until he gave up after the siege of Ba Sing Se.
Interesting.
There's two other guys named Ogode and Kachi. I could be butchering these names. They have melee weaponry. Like they all have
Mhm.
their own little
Weapons and like
their own like
specialty.
expertise. So Ogode carries chains or their bolos. This
Okay.
guy Kachi, he carries a guan. I couldn't figure out
Interesting.
what that was. A guandao.
Mm.
This
Is that
other
the
guy.
like the bow type one or no?
No,
'Cause
the
it looked like a
Bogres. It's
yeah,
like
it
a
looks like
type of sword.
oh, okay.
Like a type of. It's like a stick with the sword at the end.
Oh, okay. It's like
It's one of those.
it's yeah,
He's like a
it's
big
like a
pointy
pike
stick.
almost.
Yes. Ye Lu
Yeah.
though is no, he's the explosive expert. He wears armor that masks his face, so you never.
Dude, his mask is so sick.
Isn't it so cool?
It's
He's
such
the
a cool
explosive
design.
expert. He always has explosives on him. Vachir is the guy who wields the bow. He was actually used to be part of the Yuyan archers, as you could tell by his face makeup.
Nice. Oh, right.
Right, and he's technically the other firebender, but he just puts his fire on the end of his arrows. Yeah,
That's cool. That makes so much sense.
yeah, and so after the 100-Year War, also they recruited new members to their rank, but you never really see them. There's a guy named Utor who was a former Fire Nation soldier, Seijir and Junho. So these are some other guys. It is also said by Iroh at some point that they also are a really good singing group.
That's so funny.
Which I think
they
is
just bust out the acapella.
Yeah, that they're like a funny little singing group. I think that's hilarious. Their name, the Rough Rhinos, is derived also from Teddy Roosevelt's historic cavalry, their brigade called the Rough Riders.
That makes sense.
Which, like, they're
What a
bringing in
pull.
what a pull.
Yeah, honestly.
I think that is so interesting. They also left. They became freelancers as a group led by Colonel Monkey. But they remained loyal to the Fire Nation, and Fire Lord Ozai hired them to track down and kill and capture this guy Onomu, who was a former Fire Army general who defected to the Earth Kingdom and stolen secret war plans. And that's between like 95 and 99 AG, I believe. So right before we get
coming back.
So yeah, there's a bunch. I just think it's really funny, and I wanted to talk about how they have a whole lore and a whole Wikipedia page.
That's awesome, honestly. They're like the tie to Iroh and the siege of Ba Sing, the like failed siege of Ba Sing Se is such a cool thing. That again, just like
that's a tie-in.
Yeah, it just lends more connective tissue. The fact that they all have this level of backstory is awesome. Like they're not just these like random, like they are these just like mercenaries that you see, but they really have a thought out place in the world and like ways that they connected and interacted with other things. Like Ozai having hired them before the show even started, like that's awesome.
I think it's the coolest thing ever.
That's really cool. And like tying into the Yuyan archers also is another thing of like what we've been talking about, where it's like the stuff that you've already seen that's being brought back and like reinforced that this is a lived in world and an established world and something that they've taken the time and the care to put so much detail and thought into. It's wild. I didn't know any of that.
It's kind of unnecessary too. Like you didn't even need to do that, but it's the fact that they did and that they did put in that work and that it makes sense. It almost makes you appreciate it more. It makes you feel like, oh my God, I love that they put this work into it and that they took the time to create.
No, it's awesome because like they 100% didn't need to. Like functionally, they could be nameless, just a group of like bandit or mercenary dudes that show up to try to like antagonize them for an episode, and like that's all they need to be. Like, do they show up again in the show? I don't.
Yes, later on, but like 1 or 2 episodes.
But again, I have to assume it's also still like a smaller, like similar role where it's like you don't need to establish that one of them served under Iroh for like during the siege of Ba Sing Se. Like that's not a thing that needs to be there. But you do have all of that, which is super cool. And also, again, I feel like we've talked about these kinds, like specifically like the design or kind of animation stuff, a little bit less as we've gone on, just because like there's only so many ways to say that they're really good at their job and make
They're
really
good at
cool.
their jobs.
They
Yeah.
make cool designs, and the animation's always great. Like they just knock it out of the park. But these guys are another example, like the pirates that we saw in book 1, and like
That they all
Jet
have a
and his
unique
crew.
personality, and
Yeah, like they all have thought through designs that are unique and inform their character, and just also strike a good like image. Like the explosives dude looks awesome. Like that's an iconic look.
like we didn't need
And
that, but we did.
yeah.
But they did it for us.
hmm
I also love too that they're supposed to be this like they're named this really talented mercenary group that has succeeded in almost all their battles except against Team Avatar and Zuko.
Incredible. They got an 0 for 2 track record as far as we see.
That we gotta know our main characters are the best. They
Yeah,
are the best
that's
at what they
funny.
do. But
That's
yeah, so
awesome.
I just love those little tidbits, and the proof is in the pudding that they put so much detail and love into this show,
They really care.
and it's felt. So yeah, anything else you want to say, Alex?
I think that just about does it. Those are awesome little facts.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to Bending the Narrative this week. Next week, we're finally meeting Toph in the Blind Bandit. I am so excited. First, before we go, Alex, where can people find you online?
You can find me online at the Alex Batts. It's BATTS on both Twitter and Instagram.
You can find me online at Kate the Official on Instagram.
Awesome. And please be sure to subscribe here to The Aspect on YouTube and any platform where podcasts can be found. Please be sure to leave a like, a comment, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. You can also follow us on Twitter/X, Instagram, and TikTok at The Aspect Co. Thank you to Peter Fraser for providing our series music. And thanks so much for listening.
And Flamio Hotman.
Hey, thank you for tuning in.
If you enjoyed this show, then be sure to subscribe here to The Aspect so you never miss an episode.
And be sure to check out some of our other shows and videos on the Aspect Network.
Thank you so much for listening, and Flamio Hotman.